Hey there, everyone. Hey, welcome to the Mom Series to Misunderstanding of me, of multiplicity, of mental illness, of whatever you got going on out there. And just if you're missing the kids, remind yourself you were a mom once. Okay. Um, so I said I would come back and read. Sorry, I'm a mess. I've been cooking all day. I don't know what I got on me here. But I think I dropped flour on me. Oh, I've got chicken soup happening, potato and broccoli and um, potato, broccoli, and cheddar soup going. Yeah, when I was making a slurry, I'll bet I got myself. And a slurry and flour was involved in that. And then I've got, I'm gonna cover it up. And then I've got so I made potato and broccoli and cheddar. I made potato and ham scallop, which is still going right now. I made a hamburger healthy, nutritious soup that came from real food dietitians. It's really good. So I use my slow cooker for three things: scallops, ham, and potatoes, which is going now. I just packaged up um, the hamburger nutritious thing. I made the chicken soup on the stove, and I also started the potato and broccoli soup last night. So I've been just cooking nonstop. And gonna freeze, and I've got some people I'm picking up stuff for too. And it's just that kind of weather that's perfect for batch cooking. All right, so I did say, I gotta get my glasses. I did say, is that in there? Do you not ever, oh, there they are. Yeah, when you gotta look for them and you don't know where they are. So, so I wanted to quickly say I misspoke in my last video. But I've got another video that talks about that. So that will upload. I misspoke in my last video, and I was talking about shared lived experience counselors, therapists, social workers, and doctors. But in my video that's uploading right now, I talk about how what I mean is I think having gone through a similar experience gives us lots of empathy and helps us to validify and really be present for people. And I think that, we can really put ourselves in a person's shoes. Um, that said, some of the best psychiatrists, therapists, social workers, counselors I have ever met in my life have gone through shared lived experiences. However, there are some shared lived experience peer and coaches and counselors and psychiatrists who never really dealt with their pain. They pushed themselves to be their best and got very interested in finding out the meaning of what was going on in their life, and they never actually did the work, or when it came up, because there are times it still comes up, they didn't recognize it and brought it into therapy with their clients. So that's what I'm talking about, is usually therapists, counselors, social workers have somebody they're accountable to. I don't know any therapists, counselors, social workers, psychiatrists that don't um, go get some kind of supervision or consult or do therapy with other colleagues or people that are above them. So that's what I wanted to say. So I don't mean that if you were abused, you can never be a counselor. If you went through a horrific event, you can never be a counselor for that. That's not what I mean. What I mean is there are people out there that have not done the work and they are out there counseling, and because they had a similar experience. And it's a lot like Me Too, Me Too, Me Too in a support group, only they went to school to be a counselor, but they never really worked on themselves. So it does show up in the work environment. That's all I really wanted to say about that. And the DSM-5, multiple personality, was first in the DSM-5 in 1952, not in 1970. I was shown it in 1970s. But by 1985, disorder was. Okay, so I wanted to correct that. So I said I would read a little bit of Dr. Stanley Siegel's book, The Patient Who Cured His Therapist. Um, and it's also with Ed Lowe. And, well, I'm sorry, not Dr. It's Stanley Siegel, MSW. Okay, so he's a master social worker. But he teaches, okay, let me just go over his credentials real quick. Stanley Siegel, MSW, is a veteran psychotherapist, international lecturer, and former director of education at the Ackerman Institute for Family Therapy in New York. Ed Lowe, I gotta get my glasses fixed, a columnist for Newsday, has lectured widely on education, journalism, and parenting. Okay, so this is mostly family counseling, but Stanley Siegel was seen as somebody who kind of stepped away from traditional therapy and took a more compassionate approach of really stepping into the shoes of his clients and understanding that his clients, patients, really did know what the problem was. So I want to read the beginning chapter. Let's see what it looks like. Just the beginning. The patient is unconventional therapy, and he does use very unconventional ways to approach things. And I just fell in love with um, part of his model because I I choose to go into a very eclectic um, use of all models. I don't think there's one model that fits everyone. I don't think there's one shoe size that fits everyone, and there's different styles that don't fit in different sizes. So I mean, I'm more of a holistic, even when it comes to psychotherapy. So um, let me just quickly read the preference, and then I just want to give you an example of kind of what I mean. I guess I could. Um, there's plenty of people that sit out here and read the DSM to you, so I don't feel bad about reading this. Okay, so I'm just going to read a little bit of it. Um, the title of the book, "The Patient Who Cured His Therapist," originally applied only to one of the stories in this collection. And while it accurately described what transpired in that story, it also served as a reminder of the difference between my view, this is Stanley Siegel speaking, and more traditional views in psychotherapy. However, lightheartedly, it posed the serious possibility that a patient's problem, quote unquote, may not be the problem, but instead a solution waiting to be discovered and put to use. As I teach and lecture around the world, I become increasingly aware of the broader and more serious implications of an idea first captured in the catchy little title of a true story. Psychotherapists worldwide continue to be trained in most practice within the confines of a medical model based on the notion that the problem of a symptom a person presents is rooted in pathology. Now, I've told you my channel is about the stigma, the pathology, the profit in pathology, the problem with the trauma model, the medical model. And this is why I love this. So I'm just going to read this. So most are trained in a medical model, a trauma model. There's symptoms, there's pathology. The symptom is a pathology, right? Okay. These traditional therapists listen to a problem to search for how it might fit into a larger category of previously identified illnesses or disorders. That's going to be in the DSM. That neatly solves the problem for the therapist, but not for the patients. Yet, as I sit and listen to people who present their stories, and their anguish, I marvel at how their problems and symptoms, often unique, may provide stability, respite, continuity, or even security to the patients who cling to them. In short, how well the problems may help them function. The more I explore a situation to find out what is right rather than what is wrong about it, the more creativity I discover, and the deeper is my conviction that the human spirit is way ahead of the human mind in its genius for adaptation. I solely believe that. Okay? A therapist's job may be less to cure a problem than to identify, respect, and even revere how it in turn solves or rectifies the dilemmas life throws in our path. Whenever I cast a so-called problem in a positive light for a patient, identifying its function, the person burdened with it often gains a reinforced respect for himself and for what his or her spirit is seeking to achieve, and so do I. What's more, I increasingly feel an awe in the presence of human relationships for how we serve each other's unique individual needs and by what miracles we find each other. I've studied enough academically to appreciate the science of psychology, but circumstantial evidence simply abounds to support the idea that our relationships are far more spiritual and immeasurable than they are physical and quantifiable, and that our psychological well being largely depends in an extent to which we serve each other within our relationships. Love cannot sensibly be addressed and scrutinized so clinically as to deny the awe it inspires. And so satisfactory physical explanation exists. Yet, for how people manage to seek and so generously serve each other, others' ordinary but often highly specific needs so well. We just do. And much of the satisfaction I get of my work is from that inspiration I derive from seeing over and over how imaginatively and creatively we do, how we address our own fears, needs, loyalties, and loves, and how consistently and symmetrically we help each other, knowingly or otherwise. For me, therapy is the process of decoding the soul. As I seek what experiences I share in common with an individual, I am connected both to my own soul and to the infinite much permutations of possibilities that continually suggest how we are all connected in some profoundly spiritual and likely unscientific way. Only then does therapy achieve reverence for the power of creativity of the human spirit. Stanley Siegel, 1998. So, in his book, what I was hoping to show is that I made mention that if a person's on a bad acid trip, or maybe they've got dementia and they're hallucinating, or maybe they are in the middle of a manic episode and having delusions, or a schizoaffective episode and they're having delusions, or a schizophrenic episode, or a schizoatypical and they're having delusions, grandiose, or they're having delusions. They're outright either paranoid or of a belief that is absurd, a fear that doesn't seem to make any sense, whatever it is. It's sort of like babysitting a person on an acid trip. And what people are looking for is validation. But also there comes a point where you have to like break through that illusion. And I have found many times in my life since I've been diagnosed with DID, what was then called MPD, that I've questioned, is this real? Why is this happening? Okay, so am I really becoming other people? Um, does every part of me what is this serving for me now? What gonna tell me I can't get over that ever? My mind's always going to be scrambled. I'm always going to switch. I'm always going to jump to another alter persona. I mean, it wasn't until I really started questioning what purpose does this serve in my life? This multiple personality, this DID. I was very aware that I disassociated. I was very aware that at times I felt dereal and that I was depersonalizing and having panic. I was also aware that I had gaps in my memory. And so I started becoming very structured and keeping track of everything. But some of the stuff that people got over on me with the belief system that I didn't know what was going on, I started to actually believe. And my therapist always said, I followed your lead. I was like, yeah, but you followed my lead. And it was definitely, um, lots of people said, yeah, that's what it is, MPD. I was in the hospital. I was evaluated. Doctors that knew about MPD, that were looking for MPD, saw MPD. But on the other side of it, what I can say is it's a defense mechanism. That's all it is. It's a defense mechanism that I was given permission to have. Now, how all these names, alters, alter egos came up was more of the defense. It was more adding to the story. It was making the defense more airtight. It was honing my defense. And I have often said to people with DID and MPD, can you make yourself stop? Can you just own that feeling? Can you just stay present? Can you just ground yourself and stay present? Let yourself yell and scream. Acknowledge that you might have compartmentalized when you were younger. You might have actually disintegrated, like developed over here and over here, different ego states, which is what DID is. You develop different ego states that couldn't get together because it was between the ages of 0 and 6, and you were still forming, or 0 and 9, repetitive stuff was happening, and you didn't solidify those states of your mind, ego states, structural disassociation. You didn't develop an integrative whole personality. Okay. Um, but can you make yourself stop when you know that you're starting to disassociate? And yes, most of us can. We can feel when we're starting to disassociate. We can feel when we're feeling a switch coming on. And it's almost like interrupting an aura before a seizure. Um, I'll talk more about that later, but it's also like interrupting a cramp I have what's called contractures, where for the longest time I thought, geez, my foot's cramping, but like my foot would actually go like this, or my hand would go like this. Like my hand would just, it still does, cramps in, and it stays like this. And I mean, my fingers feel like they're breaking. Like, is there something I can do to stop that? It's always my left side. Can I stop? Is there something I can do to stop that? Because it's coming on. Yeah, there is. I could stop, stretch, drink water, massage it, um, move it, shake it out, like shake my sillies out. Really, um, I can make sure to stop and stretch when I'm wearing shoes all the time. There's a lot of things I can do. So once you know the tools, once I know the tools, I had to keep saying to myself, am I gaslighting my own self, for God's sake? Why is this happening? And um, so once I learned how to be co-conscious, co-running, share and navigate life with all of me and not be ashamed of my feelings and not make myself small, dummy myself down, and not withhold the truth, I didn't need those personalities anymore. Now, whatever I needed them all for, and occasionally I still do, I'm like, oh my gosh, I guess so and so was around for a minute or two. I guess so. I'm like, I hear something come out of my mouth. I'm like, but it's like a gap, it's like a clip. It's not like it was, before. So I really do think that MPD, DID, and I just want to say this, DID is something we can grow out of. I think we can as we get older. And if you look at the literature, you'll see as women and men, especially if they were diagnosed in their 20s, 30s, by the time they get to their 40s, late 40s, 50s, 60s, they are losing time less. They are switching less. And it's not because there aren't stressors in their life. It's because they've learned, maybe there's less stress, but I think they've dealt with their issues more and learned to not keep looking back in the past. I have my days, it creeps up on me. I look in my past, but it's manageable. So that's uh I think that is the resilience of the human spirit, is knowing you can move forward. And I really appreciate that about Dr. or Stanley Siegel, I'm sorry. And then I mentioned in another video, Dr. Todd Grande shared his story of resilience after a terrible accident. And Katie Morton, a therapist on YouTube, shared when she went through a great time of depression, um, how she bounced back from that, and how there's still times those things come up, but you know what to do. Okay, so there's nothing that's broken forever. There's nothing that is no use. And then I share in my other video about how my own psychiatrist was born in the 1940s with club feet, and she graduated one of four women in 1950s as a psychiatrist, and she was told, you'll never. She wanted to be a nurse. They said, you'll never be able to keep up with. She had like 14 to 16 surgeries as a baby to a child. She was away from her family. She was in a lot of pain. She was drugged. She was in braces. She was in casts. She was crippled. And when she went to medical school, not many people took her seriously. Um, she knew that some of the residents and colleagues were looking down at her. She wondered if her patients would ever take her serious, but she ended up becoming a supervisor of the therapist that took care of me, supervisor of a whole bunch of therapists, a teacher. When she left in her 90s to do her sabbatical, she went and wrote a book, and then later retired to a facility. She became a mother, a wife. She always wondered, would anybody find her attractive? Not only limping, but um, with some very real problems that were going to come along down the line. Would she be able to bear children? Would she be an efficient mother with uh, the problems she knew she had? During medical school, she suffered with extreme depression, and she was terrified to tell anyone, and she was being medicated for it. And then anxiety and depression. Well, at 91 years old, she traveled to a symposium in 2019 to raise her hand to a bunch of a medical symposium, to talk about mental health with medical students, and how medical students are the least served, or it's the most stigmatized. Doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, counselors, social workers, and nurses and doctors are the most stigmatized of mentally ill. And they actually go through the most stress and they perform at the highest level with extreme adversities. And being a woman back in the day, becoming a psychiatrist was strike one against her. But being a woman that was considered cripple was even, I mean, that you could see the deformity that she had. And it made her feel vulnerable and it made her feel less than. And she really just wanted to go into psychiatry to destigmatize women in depression and worthlessness. And she was very empowering to me. I absolutely adored her. Um, I remember her telling me, and I got this in my other video, I had had meningitis 3 times. And I was in a wheelchair, and I had a brace on my leg, and I had a neurogenic bladder, which meant I had to do self-cathing. And I was always looking klutzy, tripping over my feet. I was moving slow like an older person, but I was in my 30s. Um, and I just remember having to go be in a simulated um, thing to drive because spatially, um, from the meningitis, spatially, um, everything seemed off. And um, they had to make sure that the brain swelling went down. They had to make sure I could drive and my reaction time would be good and everything. And I don't think anybody in my family ever really understood what I went through. I think they were like, oh, well, she had viral meningitis and she got over it and it's all better now. And oh, yeah, she's in the wheelchair. In fact, I remember somebody in my family just kind of treating me like I was a hypochondriac when I was in the wheelchair. And I just really, it told me everything I needed to know. I mean, I literally had no feeling in my left leg, and it was not in my head, it was in my spinal cord. It was a nerve damage in my leg, and I literally had to use catheters to get urine out of me. And he just couldn't understand this. He just was like, why? Why would having meningitis affect your bladder? He just couldn't connect it. And I was like, and that's the stuff you got to get away from it. And I remember uh, she's my psychiatrist, and she said, don't let anybody tell you you're crippled. Don't let anybody tell you you're broken. And okay, you need some medication right now. You're anxious and you're depressed. But you know what? So what? You're going to manage it. You're not going to stay on this forever, and you're going to be okay. And we're not going to fix what isn't broken. You're not broken. And she used to tell me just pray, pace, and persist because she knew I was a Christian, and she knew I read the Bible, and she knew I believed that. And she would tell me, you are a wonderful mother. You are a wonderful social worker, and you cannot let this stop you. But I did let it stop. I listened to the wrong people in my life that said, "Oh, well, this multiple person. Oh, you can't be a mother. You can't." And I let 30 years be taken away from my life, and that's my fault. And so, it's great that we're destigmatizing these things, but then you can't hold on to it either. Because I would be a liar if I was to tell you that it's okay for you to be 500 different personalities in front of your children. It's not okay. That's not healthy for your children. It's not. So, yes, you could be a parent and have DID if you have the right supports in your home. But if you're alone, a single mom, and you have DID, it's scary for your children. It's scary for you. It's scary for anyone, right? So it's scary for me too. So my children had to go live with my cousins for that time period. It was to be for a season, not forever. Okay. So um we can't just cut people off. And I keep thinking of Britney Spears, how they were just gonna cut her off and say, you're done, girl. But keep working, keep the gravy train going. You had a bad season. You fell down you dropped all your eggs out of your basket. But oh no, you can't get back up. But get up on the stage and work. They did that to Judy Garland too. Oh my God. Judy, keep getting out there on stage, but oh my God, when she wanted to be a mother and have children, you can't be home. We need you at the studio. You can't be home being a mother. Oh no, it's time to come back to work. When she was sick, come back to work. Marilyn Monroe, when she got pregnant. No, come back to work. But I'm sick. Come to work. Um, and in a lot of ways, Judy Garland and I would say Judy Garland for sure was under a conservatorship when she married Sid Roth because Sid became her manager of money, and would get her back together and get her on stage, make sure everything was done. You just keep bringing in the money, make money. And I mean, I think I want to do a separate video about that completely, but there's so many women in Hollywood where that happened to. Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe, um, off to the hospital, come back, get back up, go to work. Carrie Fisher, so many. But I don't think I've ever seen such an awful case as Britney Spears' case. And it's happening a lot more to women. It's always happened more to women. And I'm just really, really thankful that my psychiatrist, a woman who passed away last year, but she got up at 91 years old with Parkinson's, with club feet, with cripple, with arthritis, a mother, a grandmother, a wife, psychiatrist, a renowned psychiatrist here at the U of R, Dr. Mildred Russ, went on to raise her hand during question and answer, and I'll put all the links down there, and say, I was a medical student to become a psychiatrist, and I went through depression, and these things need to be addressed for medical students. It's time, especially during the pandemic and all the loss that's going on. So, and what she always said is, I believe my patients know what their problem is. I believe they hold on to their problem as long as they need it, and that when it's no longer working for them, they get rid of it. Same thing this man believes. It's defense. So I want to just quickly read one case that Stanley Siegel had, and he calls it and I will kind of rush through it a little bit. I won't read the whole thing. Okay. Sin's syndrome. That's what he's calling it. Sin syndrome. Long Island, New York, 1979. Cheryl Baker entered the room cradling a newborn wrapped in pink. She directed 3 other children to the seats nearest to the one she claimed with her pocketbook and baby bag. The older children were scrubbed and polished, fastidiously dressed, as well as behaved as any I had ever seen. They sat upright, folded their hands in their laps, and smiled hesitantly at me and Bernard Whaler, a young family practice resident who was training. I was supervising at a family study center. Other trainees were observing from behind a two-way mirror. They are there, you guys. But I had asked Bernard to accompany me because of a medical notation on the intake memorandum. The oldest of Cheryl Baker's children, a boy who was about 10, noticed his mother struggling with her equipment and jumped to remove the bag and pocketbook from the chair. A simple, unaffected gesture that spoke paragraphs about at least this child's relationship with his mother, who obviously had inspired this generosity. Is your husband joining us? I asked. Should we wait, or are we all here? My husband couldn't get off work today, she said, with a weak but gentle smile that I took to mean that the husband did not want to come, or maybe didn't know about the appointment she had made. I would have preferred otherwise, but he wasn't there, and I couldn't do much about it. Well, why don't we begin then? I said. I have a cryptic note here that suggests that you're having problems with the baby. Why don't you tell me what brought you here? She looked down at the baby, then at the floor. The room fell silent as the older children watched their mother with a worried look. Talking more or less to the floor, Cheryl said quietly and plaintively, I need to know how to take care of her, the baby. My first reaction was surprised after all. She evidently had raised 3 children from infancy. The baby is more difficult than your other children were at that stage, I declared. She nodded affirmatively. Well, what is the greatest difficulty with the baby? Let's start there. She has Down syndrome, Cheryl said, ever so quickly. The 4-word utterance had significant impact. Right away, I would imagine the dramatic change this family would go through, the disruption of life they had lived. My mind raced ahead to sacrifices that ranged to intensify from unfair inconveniences to genuine suffering. I hadn't taken a good look at the infant, but now I was straining to see her face. Oh, I said, when did you learn this? Cheryl answered softly, staring down at the bundle in her lap. Well, she said, I read an article about it a couple weeks ago. My brow raised. She saw my expression and continued, I read an article in the Reader's Digest that it was about birth defects in babies, like Down syndrome babies. It said that babies with Down syndrome have very wide spaces between their toes. And so I looked at her toes, and she was very wide spaces between her toes. She snapped the sentence shut, raised her chin, and looked directly into my eyes. The other children looked up at me. Bernard looked at me. Doctor. The Reader's Digest, I thought. Friend and advisor to 17 million Americans. Case cited, case closed. I tried not to reveal my surprise. This is sort of like when you get Dr. Oz and celebrity doctors and all this stuff, right? Or School of Google University. I guess I expected the name of the doctor followed by a symptomatic synopsis of his diagnosis. I looked over at Bernard. For a slightly wrong reason, I was accompanied by the perfect co-therapist. I felt very lucky. Cheryl, I said gently, my colleague Bernard here is a physician. Do you mind if he examined your baby? What is the baby's name? Catherine, she said, rising, unwrapping the baby, and presenting her baby to Bernard. Kathy, she added, speaking directly to him. You can call her Kathy. Bernard took Catherine in his left hand, cradling her back and neck with his right hand, holding her bottom. He hefted her up in the air slightly, watching her limbs. Later he explained he was looking for them to see if they had weak muscle tone, floppy arms or legs or head. He asked Cheryl if her daughter looked at her when she approached. Cheryl said yes. Meanwhile, the infant appeared to be focusing on Bernard already. Bernard asked if Kathy smiled yet. Now and then, anyway, he asked. Oh, yes, smiles all the time. How often does she feed? Bernard asked while touching the back of his pinky to Kathy's lips, which promptly pursed and closed around Bernard's finger. Is she a slow feeder compared to what you remember of your older children at this stage? No, she drains her formula bottles really good. He asked about bowel movements, and Cheryl said that Kathy's bowel movements were fine. The kids giggled. Bernard looked intently at Kathy's face. He felt around the back of her head, all the while cooing and watching her eyes follow his. He touched and probed, unsnapped and snapped Kathy's stretchy, like that's, I guess, like a onesie, and finally glanced over to me and ever so slight shrug and raised brow. The physical examination was as complete as possible, and nothing was wrong with the baby. I said, thank you, Bernard. I looked at Cheryl, truly puzzled. Whatever would make so obviously a capable a mother create a private diagnosis of Down syndrome in her beautiful and healthy newborn, and how could I pry this illusion, function, this illusion's function from her thoughts, let alone without scaring the children. Looking at the oldest child as if to suggest that he and I were co-conspiring to free his mother from her problem, I tilted my head slightly, leaned back, and rose from my chair. I recalled a similar case involving Carl Whittaker, a pioneer family therapist at the University of Wisconsin, a department of medicine in which he used a ruler to disrupt an illusion. This intervention was radical, and I would duplicate it in an attempt to dislodge an absurd illusion, with an equally absurd examination. All eyes followed as I stepped to a two-way mirror and rapped my knuckles against it with as much pompous authority as I could muster. "Bring me a ruler," I commanded. "Look in my top desk drawer." I glanced back at the boy and nodded, even half winked, as to suggest, "We will get to the bottom of this." He stared bug-eyed at me, but the other two stared in admiration at him. An observing therapist entered the room and gave me a wooden ruler. "Everyone, please take off your shoes and socks now," I said. "You too, Bernard." I smacked the ruler against my hand, looking at the boy again, looking thoughtfully at my own feet, then began to deliberately remove my own shoes. The kids reacted eagerly. I whispered to them, "My mother is going to be ever so happy that I am not wearing socks with holes in my toes." They smiled, while their mother struggled to bend over past the baby to remove her shoes. Trailing a clipboard and pen in my left hand and the ruler in my right, I got down on my hands and knees, and I started with Bernard. Let me turn my light on. I'm sorry, it's really dark in here. Sorry for the interruption. Sorry about that. It suddenly went dark. Okay. And started with Bernard. I started measuring his toes of his left foot first, then his right, and the spaces between each toe, writing down the result, as if I were taking inventory of state secrets. I repeated the measurements with each child, then with Cheryl, then with little Kathy, then myself, asking the boy to hold the clipboard and transcribe my calculations. I retrieved my clipboard, returned to my chair, took a calculator out of my pocket, and began punching in numbers. Finally, I looked up at the children, took a deep breath, and sighed. Glancing first over at Bernard, then back to the kids, I said, "It appears from these measurements that my colleague, Bernard, has Down syndrome." The doctor. The older boy let out a short burst of laughter, freeing his sisters to giggle along, freeing me to laugh just behind them, freeing Cheryl, the patient, and Bernard, in that order, to fairly collapse in laughter that lasted about 20 seconds. Cheryl seemed a little nervous in what must have been a profound moment of recognition. She said, "You know what I think? I think I imagined a problem with the baby. I might have made it up in my head because she is so different from the other three. This is something probably only I knew about or even know about, that Kathy's features are so different. I mean, her eyes, her hair, you could look at her and say, she's a beautiful baby, but where did she come from? Maybe you would see a little of me in there with her, but you couldn't find a trace of Tom, her father, you know? Now it made sense. This child was different. A secret Cheryl believed could devastate her life. Her perfect illusion covered her worst fears. Now that she seemed ready, even eager to confront her fears, I suddenly had to protect the children, who may not have been so ready. I interrupted, saying, "Excuse me, but these young people have been awfully patient with us," looking at the oldest again. my comrade, I asked, would you children prefer to relax in the waiting room while your mom talks with Bernard and me a little while longer? We have a television out there and nobody's using it. Do you want to go out there for a few minutes? The kids all nodded. With the children gone, Cheryl continued, you probably can guess that there's a reason for that, which there was. It almost feels like I've been hiding it for so long that I must have hidden it from myself. As impossible as that seems. So what I must have done was, the fourth child was so different, and obviously, anyway, there had been a problem. So I made the baby have the problem instead of having the problem be the problem. And now I don't know what to do. She then told a fairly conventional story about a couple who had gradually drifted towards other distractions in their marriage and away from uh, all its attractions like attentiveness, tenderness, and ultimately passion. While she was agonizing over Tom's romantic interest that had been piqued elsewhere, another man began to pay particular attention to her. The result was Catherine. And with the news of her conception, the end of the affair. So your guilt led you to believe strongly that something must be wrong with the baby, I said. Do you know that this ability to organize an illusion as a defense against reality is not so unusual? It isn't. And it's very powerful. I'm going to say it again. Do you know that this ability to organize an illusion as a defense against reality is not so unusual? It isn't. It's very powerful. I haven't faced anything very well, have I? She said. Not anything. I don't know about that, Bernard said. I think you've done quite well at the moment, don't you? Bernard is right, I said. You just walked yourself out of a very powerful illusion. You just did that yourself, and you brought yourself here to do it. She smiled weakly, sighed, and declared, I did, didn't I? That's a nice thought. I need to believe that. I think when I was watching you examine the baby and ask me all those questions, I knew something was ending or something was lifting. What do I do now, though? I don't know what to do. Do you think you might ask your husband to come back with you for another appointment? I asked. She sighed again, half determined, half resigned. Yes. After a long pause, I'll talk to him. I will. But what should I tell him? I shrugged. Tell him I said that you've made an appointment. I felt she had taken a big enough step at the moment, just being there and walking away and freeing herself from her illusion that served to free her from a difficult truth. We would deal with that in another session and her husband present. The immediate problem now solved, though, a little gentle humor and absurdity was the illusion she had created to handle her intense anxiety about the consequences of reactions, even to thwart her own recognition of reactions. I saw her illusion as kind of a metaphor for the illegitimacy of her child. Somehow it balanced the past and the future, made everything sum up correctly in her mind, and acted as a kind of guardian, protecting her from her own secret. Continuing to operate under the protection of the illusion would have created a greater and more absurd disaster in the future, so an absurd intervention was used to stop the absurd illusion. Postscript. Cheryl Baker's illusion provided one of those rare opportunities to apply a procedure learned in a classroom to a remarkably similar situation of my own, and then to enjoy the wonderful experience of watching it work. The technique was a variation on a theme I had been exploring since my days of graduate study, since that time, in fact, of the spaghetti stories, quote unquote. The idea of joining someone's universe of extending illusions to an absurd length in an effort to yank their author back to a more manageable reality. Spaghetti stories, the idea of joining a person's illusion, their universe, and extending their illusion to the extreme in order to bring the author back to reality, a manageable reality. Okay? Cheryl's was an extreme illusion, but she knew she had a problem. All right, so I'll stop there. With multiple personality, DID, and also repressed memory and false memory, that we know is false. Not all repressed. No, not all things that we shove down are false. But there are, as I don't believe in recovered memory. I don't. I believe we always know. And that's what Stanley Siegel believes. We always know. We always know what the problem is. We just create what we need to defend ourselves from it, even if we create illusions, even if we create subconsciously when we're younger and develop alter ego states, structural disassociation. That happens in infancy through 6 years old. But when we're older, when we're 25, 28, 30, what good does it do us to be told, well, you develop this personality and this personality, and they're going to keep arguing because they don't like this and this one likes that, and just let them autonomically, I can never say that word, be autonomous. Can't say it. Let them go live their own life. Make a schedule. They can do their thing. This one likes to cook. This one likes to sew. This one likes to knit. This one likes to do hair. Schedule your day so they all have their time to do it. Get married. But now tell your partner you got 5 wives. You can only sleep with these 3. There might be a switch in between, but you got to know to stop when that one comes out. It's a little absurd. It's a little absurd. It is a little cray-cray. Oh, one of the littles is coming out now. And I will do a whole other video about how there are men and women that enjoy having the littles come out. So just, I don't want to go through it now. There is so much internet culture about multiple personality, dissociative identity disorder that is bogus. And yes, it did start in the 80s and the 90s. And yes, I did take part in all of that because I learned a way to behave from everything. I believed myself to be crazy. I believed myself to be, oh, when I'm drawing, I'm Joanna. When I'm knitting, I'm Joanna. When I'm yelling and protecting people, I'm Tony. I'm a tough woman. I'm a protector. When I'm praying, I must be Celie. When I'm cleaning, I must be the clean freak. I believe these things, but it's me. It's me. Now, I do have one aspect alter persona, part of myself that has a whole different energy than me. And I haven't been able to integrate that. I don't even know how the others did. Naturally integrated over the years as I started being accountable for my own stuff. Like, okay, my mother did that to me and I stayed afraid forever. Oh, I saw my dad do that to my mother and I stayed afraid forever. Oh, we had to go there and I never felt like I had a home, and oh, I was being tossed around, and where the heck was my brother? And I mean, I could go on and on. And why did that unfair thing happen? And geez, I never meant to divorce my husband. We were going to get legally separated and just kind of like work things out. And next thing I know, I'm in Florida and being sent away and told, don't talk to your husband on the phone. Well, I mean, I could, there's just so many things that I could say, you know, what, what was that? I, like a little girl, I listened to my family. I, I listened to like what my psychiatrist said. I listened to what people told me instead of what I knew. Okay. So what I'm really pleading with you guys that have been diagnosed DID is don't embrace it, cuddle it, curl up with it, and become it. Um, you're not broken, you're not crippled, you're not disabled, you're not. And all of my paperwork for disability is like um, multiple medical issues that were disabling me, and it wasn't supposed to, it was never multiple personality. I worked with multiple personality or DID, what they're calling it now. Um, I made sense with it, but when they asked me to then accept it and recognize it and tell my whole family about it, people about it, that's what was really crazy. See, because if you're gonna go off into another reality, become another person, and uh and expect everybody to acknowledge you as if everything's okay, we just got a different person here today, and everybody play along with that alternate universe, it you got to push it to the extreme to bring it back and be manageable and have some reality. And that's what Stanley Spiegel is saying here is people do have to go along with the spaghetti stories, the universes that don't make sense, the stuff that doesn't make any sense. It's like that acid trip where you have to sit there and say, "Yep, I see that too. Oh, I'll take care of it. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, 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 that is happening, but it's not." And you get it under control and you manage it. Once it's under control and you know it's manageable, why would you keep going back to it? So MPD is not forever. It is not forever. Uh, Britney Spears went through a bad time. It wasn't forever. Um, Judy Garland went through a bad time. It wasn't forever. Marilyn Monroe went through a bad time. It wasn't forever. People fall down. People drop everything. People become messes. They make a mess all over themselves. It's not forever. Um, so that's my video. That's all I got to say. Thanks. Have a nice day. Tomorrow I'm going to read from The Myth of Sanity by Dr. Martha Stout. And I am going to do a video where I talk more about conservatorships because there's different. Wow. I mean, it's a landmark case, what's going on with Britney. And I just pray that she realizes that her family is squirming right now because the gravy train is over. And so they're going to try to rattle her and make her look crazy. And I'm just praying she stays strong. All right. And take care, everyone. Thanks for watching. And I'm sorry about that it got dark in here. And I know another long video. I'm going to be making some long videos. I don't mind making them if you don't mind watching. Hit the like and subscribe button if you like the content that I'm sharing. I am trying to talk y'all out of having DID forever. I am trying to talk y'all out of holding on to alternate realities and personas and universes, um, and suffering that you don't need, that you can say goodbye to now. Um, you don't want to get to your 60s and still be all over the place. Okay? You don't. And it will naturally start to go away um, as you accept that nothing can hurt you anymore. Okay? That that you already survived. Right? All right. That's all I'm going to say. Take care. Bye-bye.